This video is a compilation of my Metroid Prime what you couldn't miss. I got timestamps if you want them, please enjoy. Metroid Prime is such an important game in the Metroid library. It took us into the 3D era for Metroid that has influenced this series to this day. This makes it a perfect candidate to discuss many things others probably haven't covered, or should I say couldn't have missed, in Metroid Prime. And to start, let's take a look at what we couldn't have missed in Frigate Orpheon. With our only reason being here being due to a distress signal, initially we don't know what we are in for, but we pretty quickly realize it's due to a hostile alien invasion. Though in a similar speed that we realize this, we also figure out the cause as well. Because to lend our assistance to the distressed, we also need to technically invade the frigate, which means bypassing its security, which we quickly realize can be done with Samus's basic arm cannon shot. While we can assume her specific type of projectile isn't super common, any invasion worth their salt definitely would have this type of tech, making these security gates useless. Once we enter into Orpheon's depths, we run into a giant alien creature. Scans detail many of the biological attributes of this creature, including its musculature and its acid sacs. These traits all describe a creature that is extremely formidable, and most likely also intelligent. So with the obvious alien-shaped hole in the wall, it's safe to assume this alien wouldn't have just flung itself onto the frigate for no reason, which gives us two options. 1. The alien forgot to look both ways before diving in for a landing, or 2. Another alien with similar skills flung this one into the frigate maliciously. With all the intense scenes of destruction seen, we finally make it to some of the most intact portions of the frigate, these being many research specimens all in some sort of prison block. Through our scans, we can learn that many of them have been altered by mutation due to the space pirates' research. This type of research can only mean the space pirates have the desire to find one specific process that can enhance either creatures or their abilities in a specific facet. While there are no specific logs explaining what facet they wanted to enhance, we can make an easy guess based off of the alien that appeared to be mutated. Since this alien matches the alien we discussed prior, clearly the space pirates were attempting to learn to enhance pheromone genes with this mutation process. And while it looks like the creature's mutation failed, it actually succeeded too well, leading to many of the same aliens coming to see what the immense amount of pheromones meant, especially when they could sense it came from one of their deceased kind. With the state the space pirates are in, it's pretty hard to not feel a little bad for them, because there's many dead and wounded all over the place. But with them being the enemies we face, they have to have a reason to be, our enemies, and why they kind of attack us on sight instead of accepting the help. And we see that pretty easily by knowing that these horrible people decided to lock up Zoomer for no good reason whatsoever other than his name. And finally, we find the main threat of Orpheon, the Parasite Queen. While now knowing the name of the race of aliens we have been seeing being parasites explains a lot, it doesn't explain the Parasite Queen's deep knowledge of the entire blueprint of the ship, so much so to position herself near a perfect shield for her to use to protect herself in this boss fight. While many guesses can be made, the only proper explanation is that years before they were led here by the pheromones of their deceased kin, parasites actually were allied with the space pirates, helping them with resources, funding, and most importantly, this frigate. While this symbiotic relationship was still active till this day, the obvious signs of foul play between the races due to these experiments caused the parasites to cash in on their namesake and start being detriments to their hosts by wreaking havoc and attempting to take back their ship. And lastly, to explain how Samus's Various suit got reset in this scene here, what actually happened is there's a reset button on the back of Samus's suit that can be switched either on or off. But the issue is, while it would be easy enough to turn it back on for her to get all of her abilities back, Samus actually can't get out of her suit at the time because of the hostile environment she is in. So, unfortunately, she just has to reclaim all of her abilities the old-fashioned way instead of clicking the reset button back into place. We land on the Tallon Overworld, but quickly realize we can't do much here and go to Chozo Ruins. These ruins are definitely ruined, so let's look at what you couldn't miss. As soon as we enter the plaza of Chozo Ruins, we instantly start encountering many engravings of birds across the walls. These clearly are foreshadowing to the incoming threat of flying enemies, which we haven't encountered up to this point. Our first encounter with Ions happens in Chozo Ruins in one of its many hallways, and while there's nothing special about this creature in particular, this is the one instance of the scan actually lying to us, because it tells us that it's entirely composed of ocular tissue, even though it doesn't actually look like it is, and from my human eye, I'm pretty sure it isn't. The Mecha Hive boss fight is a very crazy fight to introduce us to the threats we will see on Tallon 4, and while Mecha might not be the best description of the machine, that's not what we should point out. What we should focus on is the amount of ram war wasps that fit inside of it. With the amount attacking us, either the ram war wasp can anatomically shrink, or the hive can distort its inner dimensions, expanding its interior, and based off of how no ram war wasps escape its demise, it's most likely the latter, ending in them all being crushed due to system malfunction. Stone toads are one of the few enemies that attempt to eat Samus during her ball state. While this does seem like hostile behavior, the stone toads are actually being responsible, accidentally ingesting Samus because her ball state looks like the stone toad's prescription medicine. The Incinerator drone is a mechanoid created for waste management, though, similarly to the Hive Mecha's name failings, drone is not the best naming scheme for this machine, because unlike drones, the Incinerator drone is locked in place, more like a turret, but that's besides the point, with the destroyed Hive implying the turret was turned off for a period of time. To even allow for this Hive to form, what exactly turned this turret back on? Clearly, the only explanation is the beetles, who similarly inhabit the ruins, have a generational grudge against war wasps, and saw the Hive Mecha's destruction as an opportunity to take back territory such as this room. And speaking of beetles, let's talk about their ancestry, because while this is not noticeable in the plated beetles, normal beetles have a very similar face structure to the Chozo. This implies that the beetles and the Chozo people were once a unified race, but due to years of evolution, they became separate. The main boss of the ruins is Flagra, which used to be the centerpiece greenery of the Sun Chamber until its mutation due to Phazon called forth its toxic properties. Though while many do believe that Phazon was the cause, it actually is a combination of two factors, with the first, as we all know, being the Phazon, but the second was the grudge Flagra had against the Chozo people, because as we all know, the Chozo were a very nature-centric people, and when nature is calling, where else would a people such as the Chozo use the restroom other than on Flagra? While this place is a ruins, it's a little weird that the Tower of Light has so many beams that are so poorly supported and are pretty much crumbling under the weight of the tower. Why this is the case is actually pretty simple. Because the Chozo people are a very naturalistic people, they decided to let many things weather and wear down over time, even if it meant letting their own buildings collapse on top of them. While remnants of the Chozo people are the definition of these ruins, the Chozo ghosts are the remnants of those who left the remnants. These ghosts are extremely defensive and usually engage anything they see on sight. While you would think they would be able to identify Samus as their prophesied savior, as we see in the Chozo lore, something is keeping them from recognizing us. Sadly, this means that the Chozo ghosts are little more than spectral beings with the muscle memory of the departed, replaying defensive protocols that kept the Chozo safe years prior. With Chozo Ruins water now being squeaky clean, let's head to Magmoor Caverns to explore what we couldn't miss in Magmoor Caverns. As soon as we enter, we instantly run into the namesake of Magmoor Caverns, the Magmoors. Magmoors get their name from the fact that when they spew fire, they're spewing magma, meaning more magma, Magmoor Caverns, you get the gist. The puffers are really cool enemies that when you shoot them, release poison gas. But the only odd thing about them is their name, because when you think of puffer, you think usually of pufferfish, or a puffer as in someone who smokes a lot of nicotine products. And the latter, I really hope it wasn't Nintendo's intention, because if it was, it's kind of like they're advertising smoking to a bunch of young teenagers who played this game. And I really doubt Nintendo intended this, but it's just an odd coincidence. A side room in Magmoor Caverns leads us into a massive cage residing over an open lava pit, leading us to a power-up. However, other than the power-up, there has to be another purpose for a room with this specific of geometry. The only logical answer is that the space pirates would utilize this room to cook up some Triclops by raising the lava level through the grating, causing a perfect boil, cooking them to perfection. The first of two main locations in Magmoor Caverns is a secluded pirate base. Reading the terminals we find here reveal that the pirates are utilizing geothermal energy to keep this base operational. Though, knowing the pirates' history of being non-eco-friendly, why would they utilize such an environmentally friendly option for this specific base? Thinking of the locale and how volatile combustible gases being released from mining would be, it's safe to assume they don't utilize any fossil fuels because of the constant risk of combustion due to lava. After a detour to Phendrana Drifts, we make our way to an area with many underground lava flowways covered by grates. While we know there's a draining mechanism we can use to clear out these paths, why would this be required when it seems there's only a minuscule amount of lava inside the flowways? The only semblance of an answer has to be that the lava on Tallon 4 is severely affected by tidal forces. These forces generated by the moon cause the lava to rise, explaining all the extra space the flowways have to compensate. One of the most important enemies in Magmoor Caverns are the puddle spores. Without them, there would be no way to cross many of the gaps in these caverns safely, though with them being so indispensable to Samus' journey, the fact we have to shoot these creatures to traverse them is risky and quite sad when they are so helpful. But judging by the way when you shoot them they roll over on their back like a dog would, it's safe to assume that the puddle spores either eat Samus' power beam like a treat, rolling over to attempt to get another, or feel the beam as a dog would when it's getting pet, rolling over to try to get belly rubs. As we all know, Magmoor Caverns is the home of the final projectile upgrade, the Plasma Cannon, though before acquisition, you must utilize immense Morph Ball skill not only to clear puzzles, but also Magnet Ball your way through an extensive Morph Ball obstacle course. This course, while pretty straightforward, is extremely punishing, with one wrong step leading to restarting the whole course. Not many other areas can compete to the rigor of this segment, even comparatively to areas with bosses. This risk factor was so great that near launch, the stress many players experienced would cause them to physically curl up in a ball as a stress response to this section. Why this phenomenon occurred is unknown, and it's even more odd that this experience is no longer had by players of Prime in the present day. But one thing is certain, the human Morph Ball incident left many players in shambles, with Nintendo never reimbursing them for their troubles. Phendrana Drifts is an amazing locale inside of Metroid Prime. Its icy crystals and frosty atmosphere is extremely cool, so let's take a look at what we couldn't miss inside of Phendrana Drifts. Instantly after arrival to the Drifts, we run into a terminal within one of Phendrana's waterways that controls the lock on the door above. The placement of this terminal is very curious, but with a little bit of interpretation, this can be understood. While obviously Phendrana is currently in its winter months, when summer rolled around back during the Chozo's rule, many Chozo would swim in the Phendrana waterways for leisure. However, due to the strong currents, many would get stuck in this tunnel, leading to many deaths and close calls. The Chozo, distraught by this, decided to put this locking mechanism here not necessarily to lock the door, but to use this lock as Morse code, notifying those above you were stuck. Though, with how the door was left locked, we can only assume the last Chozo that was stuck here was never rescued. Baby Sheegoths are the star of the show in Phendrana Drifts, with their adaptability to the environment and unique fighting style allowing them to top the food chain in the drifts. Though, one oddity is that while we do see Sheegoths, we never run into any He-Goths, which leads us to one conclusion. Similarly to how on Earth female Black Widows will eat their mates, Sheegoths after mating with He-Goths occasionally also engage with this practice, which explains why He-Goths are so rare and why we never encounter one during our exploration of Phendrana. The cool nature of Phendrana doesn't only extend to its temperature, because this is where we also receive the Boost Ball. The Boost Ball is a Prime exclusive upgrade to the Various suit, and comparatively to the other upgrades we receive, is the cream of the crop when it comes to traversing the game with speed. Though unfortunately, a major feature of this upgrade was cut late into development. While the usage of the boost and half pipes are simply to gain height, originally you would be able to do Boost Ball tricks and combos in unison with gaining height, making this upgrade a perfect trifecta. However, due to internal disputes, this feature was left out. We all know crystallite shells are generated by their perspiration freezing, but did you know that if they stand still and don't flip upside down every once in a while, their legs will freeze over and they will be rendered immovable? Wait, Ridley crop dusted Phendrana? Adult Sheegoths comparatively to baby Sheegoths are massive and live up to their adult status, gaining energy-absorbing ice on their back, clearly separating them from their youth. Though what many don't know about adult Sheegoths is that every time they absorb and shoot out stored energy, they also lose a small amount of calories, meaning that if a player has the patience, they can defeat the Sheegoth in an alternate manner, slowly draining the Sheegoth of all their body mass, leaving them in a shriveled and emaciated state. And what other weapon upgrade would the Sheegoth be guarding other than the Wave Beam? The Wave Beam is actually the most unique beam Samus gets because it actually waves goodbye to you as it exits her barrel. Everyone remembers the feeling of getting the thermal visor for the first time, followed by the power outage in the pirate research facility. Though, with how iconic this moment is, it's odd no one has explained how this outage occurred. All that happened was the pirates, similarly to their harnessing of geothermal energy in Magmoor Caverns, attempted to do the same here but with ice instead of lava. But instead of retooling their tech to utilize the ice, they used their lava systems here, assuming it was working since the power was still on, forgetting that they had backup batteries that kept the facility on until now, ever since this blunder. The final boss of Phendrana is Thardus, a hot piece of asphalt that is gunning for Samus. Though the difference between Thardus and an ordinary rock is their control over gravity and magnetism, which brings up the philosophy of Thardus. This boss is simply here to prepare the player for those new concepts, with magnetism alluding to the spider ball he directly guards, and gravity from the gravity suit he guards indirectly. While none of Thardus' attacks draw a perfect comparison to these two upgrades, besides the rolling move, the absurdism Thardus brings to these two facets with him defying gravity and using magnetism to keep their body together allows the player to not question the odd abilities these future upgrades give, because their illogic is nothing compared to Thardus. Tallon Overworld is the main hub of Tallon 4. With its jungle overgrowth aesthetic mixed with the remains of Frigate Orpheon, there's a lot of ground to cover in this overworld, so let's see what you couldn't miss. Tallon Overworld introduces us to the blast cap shrooms. These plants are very volatile, exploding at the slightest touch. Though, weirdly enough, while it may seem touch is causing these mushrooms to explode, that's actually the furthest from the truth. These shrooms are simply tired of being ignored, and only explode when touched if they are not acknowledged first. Though, due to Samus' visor preventing eye contact, the blast caps can't verify if they've been ignored or not, leading them to explode on Samus no matter what. Soon after the blast caps, we also run into Zoomer, who somehow escaped the Frigate Orpheon prison along with some of his friends. Though sadly, Zoomer, due to this success, gained an ego and forgot all the things Samus did for them, causing an instant fallout, ending in Zoomer's demise. The overworld is no stranger to hype moments, with this being the location we unlock the space jump. Though while many people will jokingly say they are getting their Jordans when acquiring this upgrade, not many know of Nintendo's original intention to base this upgrade off of a shoe brand for paid ad placement. Originally, the space jump would have been modeled after Doc Martens or Timberlands, though unfortunately these negotiations never went through, with the stated reason for this being paranormal occurrences. Blood flowers are very common across the overworld and weirdly enough have almost nothing to do with blood, but that is if we consider blood in the traditional sense. Thinking about the term blood in the sense of a familial line makes much more sense for this organism. Clearly the defense mechanisms of firing off spores of poison must have been evolved into after years and years of natural selection, leading to the original name familial blood flower being shortened to just blood flower. The realization process of moving through the downed ship in Tallon Overworld just to realize it was Frigate Orpheon all along is a defining moment in every first playthrough of Metroid Prime, but originally during development, this was not the case. This frigate was actually supposed to be a sister ship of Orpheon named Orphan. Frigate Orphan was originally supposed to house an orphaned Metroid that would aid Samus during the remainder of her journey on Tallon 4, though due to many complex systems needing to be coded for this companion to be possible, it was cut from the final game. Most underwater segments in Prime don't have much enemy variety overall besides reskins of land enemies. However, the Gel Zap is definitely the exception, and while it is a little sad the Gel Zap is alone in the water-specific enemy category, most Gel Zaps don't really seem to mind. If we look closely at their model, they usually wear an extremely happy smile, implying that they revel in their uniqueness and actually enjoy being the only water-specific enemy. Near the exit of the downed frigate, there are many rooms that require the use of the thermal visor and the wave gun to re-energize many of the doors that are blocking our path. Though, while these slight puzzles are not terribly designed, the fact they decided to put 3 back to back to back was not the move gameplay-wise, though the reason for their implementation actually makes sense. As we all know, Metroid Prime moves away from the general 3 hits to defeat a boss structure, but this concept is probably subconsciously ingrained in many of Nintendo's developers and design team, leading to mistakes like repeating the same puzzle 3 rooms in a row possible. The final gear upgrade Tallon 4 has available to us is the X-ray visor. This device allows us to see through any walls that are a little too thin for their own good. While this usually leads us to valuable goods, the fact utilizing this visor requires constant emittance of X-rays means that Samus essentially becomes Medusa, but instead of turning those she sees to stone, she gives them cancer, sadly meaning that any enemy that is lucky enough to survive an encounter with Samus may still be dead pretty soon after the encounter due to the extreme amount of X-ray exposure. Phazon Mines is a monumental achievement in the Space Pirate Empire, allowing for many amazing technological advancements in pirate society through Phazon, but they are bad guys, meaning this is bad, so let's see what you couldn't miss. As soon as we enter Phazon Mines, we encounter a massive crane. While this crane can be utilized to acquire a missile expansion and its shortcut once the grapple beam is acquired, it seems that the main purpose of a crane, that being moving heavy equipment, is just not required in this location. That is, unless you consider morale. As we have seen, many space pirates are not treated too kindly in their workplace. Thus, the higher-ups decided to give them this crane, essentially as a big toy to keep their workers complacent. We instantly run into proof of the technological exploits this mine has accomplished with the Trooper Pirates. These troopers have duplicated Samus's beam cannon systems, making their weapons much more powerful, though along with the duping, somehow they also created a vulnerability to the beam they duped. Though unfortunately, this was not an accidental vulnerability. Many of the troopers in this unit have gotten too strong for their own good, and this was a method the pirate leaders had of disposing strong soldiers who have ever showed any disrespect to authority. Deeper into the mines, we come across the industrial pulse beam, which allows for mining of the rock around this room. The one oddity is no matter how powerful this beam is, when it hits Samus, it does minuscule damage. While you may think this is due to Samus's shielding systems, this is actually due to the beam having a crush on Samus, not wanting harm to befall her. The ore processing room in Phazon Mines is a very memorable puzzle that all revolves around a revolving tower. Though many people know of its revolving properties, many don't know that it can actually rotate in another manner. And of course I'm talking about how this pillar also rotates along with Tallon 4 as it rotates on its axis. The mini-bosses we come across in Phazon Mines are the Elite Pirates. These Phazon-modified pirates have gained many new traits such as size, a back-mounted cannon, and the ability to absorb any of Samus's beam weapons. This wide variety of traits, along with the enclosed space we fight them in, make this mini-boss very unique, but a lot of these traits seem very familiar. If we look closely, all the traits of this boss are taken from previous mini-bosses: armor from the Armored Beetle, energy absorption from the Adult She-Goth, and since Magmoor Caverns had no mini-boss, the cannon must be a reference to the turrets at the Magmoor pirate base, meaning without all 3 points of research from outer facilities, the Elite Pirates would just be big and nothing else. Phazon Mines also has a very unique enemy, the Cloaked Drone. This guy is completely invisible unless you have the X-ray visor. However, since you need to defeat the Cloaked Drone to unlock the X-ray visor, the Cloaked Drone itself is a paradox. A paradox that the developers desired to impose on us as an experiment, testing the malleability of our minds and our ability to accept the fact that we will never know what the Cloaked Drone truly looks like. While this might not be inherently scary, the fact that the developers might have been imposing other experiments on us without our knowledge is terrifying. The power bombs are a really great item that allow you to break Bendesium, but the only thing about the power bombs that not many know is that they used to be called the super bombs, and the only reason they changed the name was because they decided to make power bombs have the same abbreviation as peanut butter, PB. Many invisible platforms become visible to us after the acquisition of the X-ray visor, though why were they built invisible in the first place? The answer is actually pretty simple. A pirate researcher who always had his lunch stolen from the community fridge decided to hide his food in a secret fridge behind the Phazon deposit, making it inaccessible without knowledge of these platforms. Hunter Metroids are a derivative of the Tallon Metroid, though comparatively to the normal route Phazon mutation takes Metroids through, Hunters somehow grow tentacles and gain a more slender physique. While you may think there was some crazy facet to this differing mutation, Hunters just purely diet better and put in the work for their new features and physique. The main boss of Phazon Mines is the Omega Pirate. This pirate is the cream of the crop when it comes to the pirate forces, having everything that would be needed to take out Samus properly. Though, with this in mind, the way the fight plays out shows a deep lack of self-confidence from this Omega Pirate. After each segment of his health bar drains, he always attempts to refill his HP by absorbing Phazon, though, due to the immense amount of time this takes, Samus never falters and just stops him in the process. The Omega Pirate even thinking he needs this extra HP, instead of just pressing the attack, shows an immense amount of doubt in oneself. And while this is a good thing since he is attempting to kill us, seeing someone suffer from so much anxiety, and quite frankly performance issues, is never a fun sight to behold. And lastly, at the end of the fight with the Omega Pirate, we see that Phazon actually has a mind of its own, choosing to melt down the Omega Pirate after its defeat and choose Samus as the wielder of its power. Why this was never explored deeper is unknown, but it's a cool thing to know nonetheless. With every nook and cranny of Tallon 4 covered, we make our way to the Impact Crater. Though, surprisingly, there were 13 more nooks and crannies we forgot to explore for every artifact, meaning we won't just see what we couldn't miss in the Impact Crater, but also its entrance, the Artifact Temple. That being said, with the 13 total artifacts, to speed this along, we're going to limit each artifact's screen time to the length of its 8-second jingle. The Artifact of Truth used to lie, but it turned over a new leaf. The Artifact of Strength isn't actually strong, but they kept up the facade well. The Life Giver artifact, while it does give life, hasn't in a bit due to laziness. The Elder artifact is actually the youngest of the artifacts. The Artifact of the Sun is actually the son of the Life Giver artifact. The Artifact of Chozo is angry at Samus for forcing the sunlight onto them while they slept. The Wilds artifact gets wild, thus has an extreme tolerance to alcohol. The World artifact has an entire race of tiny people living on it, making this artifact their world. The Artifact of Spirit is the only artifact that is actually a ghost. The Artifact of Nature weirdly was igneous to its surroundings. The Artifact of Warrior, while it is brave, has never slayed a foe in combat. And finally, the Artifact of Newborn is surprisingly the oldest artifact overall. Now with every artifact returned, we can now head to the Impact Crater, but not before facing Meta Ridley. This fight to get rid of Ridley is very intense, being the only fight with a prime space pirate that constantly switches between flying and grounded combat. Though after the fight, the way Ridley comes to his demise is odd. After the final blow is dealt by Samus, we witness Ridley get shot by Chozo technology, causing him to fall to his death. However, it's never explained how these lasers activated. The cutscene itself doesn't do us many favors, but I noticed that right before the laser fired, Ridley decided to backpedal. This movement also coincided with his tail touching the railing of the Overlook, which made me realize these lasers were simply a safety measure, shooting a laser at any child or irresponsible Chozo playing around this dangerous Overlook who made contact with the railing. And finally, we enter the Impact Crater. And almost instantly, in the first hallway, we run into the effects of immense amounts of Phazon on an ecosystem. An infinite lizard pipeline. The pipeline of Phazon-addicted lizards is the definition of what is bad about Phazon, and we can only imagine the deadly mutation these lizards would encounter if it wasn't for the sheer amount of them limiting each dose one could take. The main sanctum of the Impact Crater instantly bombards us with fission Metroids. These Metroids are pretty much identical to their larva counterparts, just colorful and large. Though thinking of the Phazon mutations we have seen in the past, not many have caused color changes so vibrantly as compared to what we see in fission Metroids, meaning that in conjunction to Phazon mutations, the fission Metroids must also be ingesting massive amounts of food coloring in addition to Phazon, which, while would be unhealthy under normal circumstances, actually combines with the Phazon, giving these fission Metroids resistances to beam weapons. Making our way down the final hallway is a little unexpected, considering there are freshly installed spider ball tracks through it, but instantly this makes sense once we see who installed them. At the end of the hallway, we run into the originator of Phazon themselves, Metroid Prime. The fight against Metroid Prime is extremely intense, with constant location and resistance switching, creating a hectic and constantly evolving fight. With how much this fight evolves, it's as if the fight is speaking to us to look into that word evolving. Considering the name of the boss is Metroid Prime, taking Prime from a mathematics standpoint usually indicates a simplification of an expression or equation into its derivative, meaning that since Metroid Prime is a derivative of a different Metroid, this implies that there is an even more complex, evolved Metroid out there just waiting to be uncovered. And while Metroid Prime's first phase would be enough for a dramatic finale, once Prime sheds its exoskeleton, we witness the core essence of Metroid Prime. This form and its ghostly appearance allows the player assurance that this is the spirit of all Phazon, and this fight definitely emphasizes this point, with the constant scramble for Phazon between the Essence and Samus being very ironic considering we are here to destroy the Phazon. However, this new form also allows us to take a look at the brain of this creature, and judging by its size, it definitely would have intelligent thoughts, but that's not what we witness. Many might write this off due to Phazon's effects. However, I believe the mind of Metroid Prime is actually affected by severe mental trauma. This trauma was brought about by Metroid Prime's mistreatment by other Metroids due to the Phazon making him not normal. Though, no matter how mistreated he was, bringing a whole planet down with him is definitely not the move. And that is the end of what you couldn't have missed in Metroid Prime. If you enjoyed, you know what to do.